Yesterday, I decided that I really ought to take a minute and send a video back home to my friends who have become family at St. James. And if you recall from my first talk that I gave at St. James, I have a particular fascination with cemeteries, and that has not changed since I came to Europe. And in the 6 months that I've been in Europe, I've had an opportunity to see some ridiculously gorgeous cemeteries. So I thought, well, what better place to film my introduction than in the local cemetery? I mean, that's logical, right? Somehow. So this morning I came to the cemetery, which is maybe, half a mile from where I live here in Stuttgart, Germany, which is in the sort of in the south central Germany. And when I actually set up my equipment to begin filming, I was walking around and I saw some absolutely exquisite grave markers. And so I thought I'd share a few of them with you because, I don't know, they're beautiful and you might find them interesting. So let me show you around the cemetery here in Stuttgart, one of many cemeteries here in Stuttgart, and let that serve as my introduction. Coming from the direction of my apartment, we enter into this courtyard through a side alley. And this courtyard serves as the beginning of the cemetery. It's kind of like the welcome center. And I enjoyed the architecture and the scene so much that I filmed it from two angles. Now, if we come to take a left out of this courtyard, you see the alley that leads into the cemetery and a closer view of the cemetery. This is the actual entrance here. The mausoleum stores all of the ashes of those who have been cremated, and they were cremated in this building, which is only, I don't know, maybe 50 meters away from the mausoleum. And I love the colors here, simply love the colors. As you can see, it's late fall, and the lilies are still blooming. I'm guessing that the symbology here is someone who's a servant of the Lord who is, I don't know, taking a knee for his reward, maybe, at the end of his life. I really like this little house. As you can see, there's a walkway all the way around it. And to me, it looks like a child's playhouse. Although I don't necessarily know that I'd want my children playing on the inside of this. But it's pretty nonetheless. Loved this because of the realism in the statue. But as we pull away from it, you see that it really is a small statue. But I just thought the detail was absolutely exquisite, and the grave itself is very well maintained. This gentleman was an architect who built two little seats right here next to his grave marker. I'm assuming that that's so his family and friends could come and sit next to him and chat in the evenings, maybe. If you didn't know better, you would almost think that this here was just an ancient monolith left by, I don't know, people from the Roman era 1,000 years ago, and I love the way it fits between the two trees. Tree looks like it was plugged into an electric source. It literally looks like it's a light. Architect, and another architect, and another architect. This family here, the Sick family, is extremely well represented in this cemetery, and I'm assuming at one time they were a family of some prominence here in Stuttgart. May still be. This was fascinating. This is not a mausoleum. It is actually a grave marker that is over top of the grave. And as you can see on the inside, if you'll ignore my shadow there at the bottom, you'll see that there's benches all around. And I'm assuming at one time people were actually allowed to sit there and visit. And perhaps maybe they did in the late evenings or afternoons. But as you can see now, there's a fence all the way around it and they don't let people in. Still looked fascinating to me. Loved the Greco relief here with the green moss growing on it. Loved the realism here. It almost looks like this woman could lift her head and look up at you. This fiery red bush looks exactly like a little tent covering the grave. And this grave, of course, is covered completely in moss. And I liked it. I actually like the fact that it's overgrown because it's unique. Didn't quite get the symbology of this grave marker. There's one man buried alone underneath here 100 years ago, and so I thought maybe that this was his wife and son left behind grieving, but they were not buried here as well, so I don't know. Thought this was simply beautiful. Loved the colors in the background, so I captured it.
This reminded me of an outhouse. I swear to you, I swear I was so tempted to go knock on the door, but I was afraid if I did, somebody might actually answer.
So hopefully you enjoyed that quick tour of the cemetery. Now I'd like to take you on a different kind of tour, and that would be the tour from Lake City to where I'm at today in Stuttgart, Germany. When I came here, I made an awful lot of video clips, and so what I'm going to do is share those video clips with you now to show you exactly what I saw and exactly what I did, and I really hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. When I left Lake City 6 months ago to come to Germany, it was really an unexpected event. Even in the back of my mind, I had always hoped to come to Europe one day and maybe reestablish my life here, but it was not an actual firm goal. It was not something that was set in stone. And so when I left St. James, in fact, when I left Lake City and left the United States 6 months ago, it was kind of in a rush. And I didn't get to say goodbye to the people that I wanted to. I quite frankly didn't get the hugs from the people that I wanted to before I left. Wednesday afternoon, shortly after lunch, I went into the chapel, which I had been using as a temporary office, and locked it up for the last time. I got into my car, passed the rectory for the last time, and got on the road, got onto I-75 and headed south to my family in Fort Lauderdale.
On my last Sunday in the United States, my family threw a kind of a going away party and invited a bunch of their family and friends from church. And this was, as horrible as it sounds, this was my last meal in the United States, my last good American meal.
On Monday night, the next night, my parents drove me to the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport at about 8:30 in the evening. And at 11 p.m., I boarded my plane. On board the Boeing 787 bound for Oslo, Norway.
That late at night, there weren't that many departures leaving out of Fort Lauderdale, so we taxied out to the runway fairly quickly, and that was it. We were rolling down the runway, and I was leaving Fort Lauderdale behind. So as you look out this window and see the lights of Fort Lauderdale, that was exactly what I saw for the very last time. And yes, it was sort of depressing. Unfortunately, the cloud cover is so heavy that you can't see that we're actually flying over the southern edge of Iceland at this point. Here we are flying over the Faroe Islands, which are a group of islands between Scotland and Iceland. And here the pilot was explaining to us what our approach was going to look like into Norway. And here is my first actual view of Norway. Those are the famous fjords. Now, what I'd like to point out here is we're coming into Oslo. You can see that in May, almost summer, the lakes are still thawing out. That's cold. Here we are approaching Oslo, and as we get a little bit lower, here we are landing at Oslo International Airport. And this was, by the way, my first time in Oslo. And on landing, I really got a kick out of the little Norwegian boy sitting in front of me who was yelling greetings to his father, who I guess was waiting in the terminal for him. Here's a better view of the actual aircraft that I flew to Europe on. And Oslo has got to have the cleanest, prettiest airport I have ever been in. It's like a museum. And of course, we fly 5,000 miles just to see a Starbucks. And yes, these are actual reindeer hides for sale. I mean, why not? Okay, I was only on the ground in Norway, I don't know, maybe 2 hours before it was time to catch my connecting flight. And this is my flight leaving Norway. And I'm going to show it for just a little longer than I normally would because, in my view, the scenery is just breathtaking as we fly out. And as we lifted off, we got maybe 100 or 200 feet in the air when we started hitting turbulence and the aircraft started rocking back and forth, which you can kind of see in the video. And some people were unhappy about it, but as a pilot myself, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was having a blast. But boy, look at those mountains in the background. Here we are flying over the first island of Denmark as we were getting ready to make our turn for our approach into Copenhagen. And this, in fact, is my landing in Copenhagen, Denmark. At this point, I hadn't slept in, I don't know, day and a half. And as you can see, I was one tired puppy by the time I got through passport control.
I arrived in Copenhagen an hour ago. I'm walking the streets and I have no idea where I'm headed.
This represented my first meal when I was in Denmark, and I had specifically asked for something that was genuinely Danish. And it was the nastiest thing I have ever put in my mouth. I am so sorry to say that, but Danish food does not appeal to me in the slightest. Absolutely everything is pickled, and I don't care for pickled food. Now, I also want to be quick to say that Denmark, the people of Denmark are extremely friendly, extremely helpful, a lovely people. But man, they just don't know how to cook.
I'm in the main train station of Copenhagen. As you can see, there's a 7-Eleven behind me, downtown Copenhagen. And immediately on the other side is Dunkin' Donuts. Haha, a little taste of home. As if to prove my point, there's McDonald's and there's Starbucks.
On the next morning, which would have been a Wednesday morning, I took the train out of Copenhagen, out of the train station you just saw, and headed toward the city of Hamburg, Germany. That was my goal, was to get to Hamburg. And these are just some video clips of the journey along the way, including, there they are, the famous windmills of Denmark. Looking here at the screen, you'll see that we were doing 235 kilometers an hour as we sped across the Danish countryside. And if in your lifetime you ever visit Europe, you must take the train across Denmark. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. This is the Hamburg train station, the Hauptbahnhof, and this was not taken on the day I arrived. The day I arrived, there were like 9 trains arriving and departing at the same time, and it was just complete chaos. This was taken a couple days later, but it shows you exactly what the inside of the station looks like. It is enormous, but extremely efficient. And this is the outside view of the train station. When I arrived in Denmark, I had some friends meet me there. Friends that lived in Hamburg that I had known before I went to Germany. And the second day that I was there, everybody had to work, so I was kind of on my own. And I wandered through the city and found this museum right here.
My second day in Germany. It is rainy and it is windy, but it is beautiful. And behind me is the Kunsthalle, the official art museum for Hamburg, and I'm about to head inside and fulfill one of my dreams, which was to tour an actual art gallery in Europe. Here we go.
The inside of the museum, there were amazing paintings everywhere. And I will tell you that I am a fan of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. So when I passed this particular painting, it caught my eye. And when I looked closer at it, I kept thinking that I really know this painting from somewhere. And when I actually took the time to read the tag next to the painting, I realized that this is an actual, authentic painting by the master Claude Monet. Hands down my favorite painter. And of course I had to get a picture of myself with it. And you'll notice that there's no glass protecting this painting. There's no cordon that stops you from walking right up to it. And I very, very easily could have reached my hand out and brushed my fingers across the canvas that is estimated at worth of $35 million. And it's just there for anybody to see. I don't know that that would happen in the United States. On one afternoon, my friend Lars showed me around the city, and so we took a train over to another part of the city, and he took me here to the town hall. This is the town hall of Hamburg that has been standing there for just about 400 years, which is significantly longer than there has been a United States. Another short train trip to another part of the town, and I'm standing in front of a 1,000-year-old church. We walked a little further down the street to this church, which we're going to zoom in a little bit here. This church is incredibly important because of this man, who would be Martin Luther. And if we walk inside the church and we look, Martin Luther stood in that pulpit right there and delivered a sermon. Another short train trip to where I was staying at the time. This is the apartment building that I lived in for 3 weeks. And I could kick myself for not taking pictures of the inside because it really was a nice little apartment. And this is in the university section of the city. And standing in front of the apartment building, looking across, this is the town hall for the little town, or I should say the suburb of Hamburg where I was staying.
So for the first installment of my journey through Germany, which brought us up to Hamburg, I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed living it, and certainly as much as I enjoyed presenting it to you. Having said that, I need to specifically thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I truly believe, were it not for the folks at St. James and the love and generosity that you've shown me, I could not have pulled this off. I would not be where I'm at today. And the place I'm at today, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, is so far ahead of where I was when I was in Lake City, because I actually feel in Germany like I have an opportunity to move forward with my life. I feel like I have the opportunity to build a life here. And I just don't think I could have done that without your support. So I am thanking you. I am very specifically thanking you all. I just couldn't have done it. So thank you, and thank you. And if you enjoyed this video, then I'll make another one showing you the next step of the journey down to the immigration center in Karlsruhe, which is on the south side of Germany. And you'll let me know. If you'd like to contact me, if you'd like to send me a message or just say hello, please do. Kay has my email address, and she'll be happy to share it with anybody that asks for it. So please do, by all means. And until the next installment, I wish you nothing but love and happiness and peace. Until next time, tschüss.